A jobless graduate returned a lost wallet 3 months later. He became a millionaire CEO. I thought my life was over the day. I couldn't land a job, Daniel muttered, staring at the rain-soaked pavement. He was broke, ashamed, and ready to give up. Then fate placed a lost wallet at his feet. What he did next would ignite a chain of events that turned despair into destiny. If you find value in real stories told with clarity and truth, make sure to subscribe to stay informed with Real Father Story. On the pavement. Present. Rain needled the afternoon like static. Daniel Reyes, 23, bachelor's degree in hand, and nothing else stood outside a glass tower that reflected 100 other towers. He had just counted his rejections, 47 emails in 1 month. The subject lines blurring into the same cold sentence. We regret to inform you. His umbrella was a limp skeleton. His shoes were thin enough to memorize the pattern of every puddle. His phone buzzed mom and stopped. He didn't call back. Pride could be stubborn even when rent was due. He tucked his resume deeper into his backpack, turned toward the bus stop, and saw it. A black leather wallet swollen with rain lying against the curb like a small shipwreck. He glanced around. People streamed past faces, hooded shoulders hunched. No one looked down. The city rarely did. Daniel picked it up. The leather was soft, expensive. The kind that didn't belong on wet concrete. He opened it with the careful guilt of someone raised to touch other people's things only when necessary. Cash. More than he'd seen in months, 50s and 20s, edges crisp. A driver's license under a fog of raindrops. Avery Lynn. A business card tucked behind it. Avery Lynn, CFO, Northbridge Holdings. A Polaroid, a kid with gap teeth holding a cardboard rocket marker, scrawled wings taped at the sides. In the corner, someone had written, "Shoot for Tuesday." There was also a folded receipt for children's sneakers, a Metro card, and a small pressed flower brown, now but preserved in the neatness of its owner's mind. The wind pushed rain into his collar. Daniel slid the cash back where it belonged and snapped the wallet shut. Two choices presented themselves with the blunt clarity of survival. Take the cash, pay the landlord, eat real food for a week, or spend his last coins to return something that could solve those problems today. He felt the choices settle on opposite sides of the same scale and knew which way it wanted to tilt. Daniel looked again at the Polaroid, at the rocket, at the handwriting that was too hopeful to be casual. He heard his mother's voice inside his head, the one that used to narrate bedtime stories and bills in the same tone. What you keep defines you less than what you return. He put the wallet inside his backpack, zipped it, and checked the business card. Downtown address. 24 blocks. He had enough for one bus ride. The rest he could walk. He chose to walk. The city unscrolled in wet gray bands. Food carts hissed. A couple argued softly under a shared umbrella. A cyclist cursed at a taxi. Daniel passed a storefront where a TV blared a panel show about hiring pipelines and skills gaps. He kept moving one block, knitting to the next like stitches. On block 9, he passed a bakery and didn't go in. On block 12, he bought a $5 umbrella from a street vendor named Hamed, who threw in a smile for free. On block 16, the call that changed everything. 3 days later, Daniel woke to the rattle of the radiator and the sour taste of worry in his mouth. His inbox was as empty as his fridge. He checked his phone anyway, mostly out of habit, partly out of hope. One unread message blinked like a small, stubborn light. Unknown number. This is Avery Lynn. Are you available to meet this week? For a second, he thought it was a scam. Then he remembered the wallet, the Polaroid, the rain. His fingers hovered before typing, yes, anytime. The cafe meeting. Avery chose a cafe that smelled of ground beans and quiet deals. Daniel wore the cleanest shirt he owned, collar stiffened with too much ironing. He rehearsed polite answers all the way there. Thank you. No expectations. I'm just grateful you called. She arrived in a navy blazer, hair pulled back, the kind of precision that suggested she'd already survived 3 meetings before breakfast. Yet when she sat down, she smiled in a way that softened the sharp edges. I wanted to thank you again, she began. Most people would have kept the cash, or at least not bothered to walk 20 blocks to return it. Daniel shook his head. It wasn't mine. That's all. Her eyes narrowed slightly, as if testing whether he believed his own simplicity. You're a graduate, right? What field? Business operations, he said. I've been applying everywhere, but... He let the unfinished sentence do its work. Avery stirred her coffee. I'll be direct. I don't offer jobs out of gratitude, but I do notice character when it walks into my lobby, dripping wet. Daniel blinked. My company is piloting a logistics venture. Small, experimental. I need someone who isn't afraid to untangle messy systems. Someone who understands that integrity is a form of efficiency. He tried to steady his breathing. And you think that's me? Avery leaned forward. I think you proved it before we ever spoke. You returned something of value when you had nothing. That's the kind of calculus I trust. Daniel's hands tightened around his cup. He thought of the eviction notice, of the resumes ignored, of nights staring at ceilings as if they held secret instructions. What's the catch? He asked finally. No catch, she said. Just work. Real work. It won't make you rich overnight, but it could make you indispensable. That night, in his tiny apartment, Daniel reread the email she sent Project Associate Logistics Division. A provisional contract, modest salary, a chance. He placed the letter on the table beside the final notice. The contrast was so sharp, it almost felt staged. For the first time in months, he slept without grinding his teeth. 2 weeks later, Daniel was in a warehouse at the city's edge, sleeves rolled, clipboard in hand. Pallets towered like puzzle pieces. Forklifts beeped like restless birds. The system was chaos boxes, mislabeled inventory, bleeding money. He saw patterns where others saw the first spark of conflict. Month 1 at Northbridge, Daniel's name began to circulate. Not loudly, not in boardrooms yet, but in warehouse corridors, in staff meetings, in Avery's brief nods during presentations. People noticed shipments arrived on time again. Costs slipped lower. Fewer complaints reached the upper floors. But in places where order grows, resistance follows. The rival, Marcus Vance, had been with the company 7 years. Operations manager, slick suits, polished reports. He was the kind of man who shook hands harder than necessary and spoke in acronyms to remind you of his importance. Marcus saw the numbers shifting and asked himself, who's eating my territory? It didn't take long to find the answer. A 23-year-old graduate with no pedigree, no experience, just wet shoes and reckless energy. Marcus smiled the way a man smiles before sharpening a knife. The pressure. Good work, Daniel, Avery said during a team briefing. Keep refining those process maps. We'll present them at next quarter's review. Marcus's eyes flicked to Daniel, then back to his tablet. The message was clear. The spotlight had tilted. That afternoon, Marcus stopped Daniel near the loading dock. You're new here, Marcus said, voice low, almost friendly. Ambition's good, but ambition without patience, dangerous. Daniel nodded cautiously. I'm just doing the work. Marcus chuckled. So did plenty before you. They burned out, or got replaced. This place doesn't reward heroes, it rewards survivors. The words lingered like a warning wrapped in advice. Long nights. Daniel pushed harder. He built spreadsheets until his eyes blurred. He rewrote routing protocols, tagged bottlenecks, learned the forklift drivers' names and birthdays. He knew every corner of the warehouse by smell wood pallets, machine oil, cardboard dust. The improvements multiplied. So did Marcus's irritation. Rumors crept back to Daniel. Whispers that his data was flawed, that his quick wins were temporary, that Avery favored him for reasons outside performance. At first, Daniel ignored them, but late at night in his cramped apartment, they echoed, "What if they're right? What if I'm just a placeholder? A lucky wallet returner, writing gratitude until it fades." Avery's test. One evening, Avery called him into her office again. The skyline burned gold behind her windows, catching fire in the setting sun. "You've made progress," she said, "but progress attracts enemies. Marcus doesn't like you." Daniel swallowed. "I've heard." "I don't care about personal politics," Avery continued. "I care about results. But you need to understand, this company isn't just numbers. It's people. If you can't win both, the betrayal unfolds." The email storm. The altered report spread fast. By noon, managers were whispering. By 2, Avery called Daniel into her office, the file glowing on her screen like an accusation. "Explain this," she said. Daniel leaned forward, pulse hammering. "That's not my version. Someone changed it after submission." Her expression didn't move. "Do you have proof?" He shook his head. His backups were on his laptop, but the company server showed only the corrupted file. To anyone else, it looked like negligence. Avery exhaled sharp as a blade. "I'm not saying I don't believe you. I'm saying belief doesn't win board votes. Accuracy does. Fix this fast." Marcus's shadow. In the cafeteria later, Marcus sat across from him, perfectly uninvited. "Tough day?" Marcus asked, sipping his coffee. "Reports are tricky. One mistake, and suddenly you're the rookie who got lucky, not the savior who found patterns." Daniel met his eyes. "You did this." Marcus smiled, teeth white harmless on the surface. "Prove it." He rose, leaving the faint smell of cologne and smoke behind like a signature. The long night. Daniel stayed in the office until midnight, cross-checking every record. He built an audit trail, printing timestamps, screenshots, emails. The fluorescent lights hummed the warehouse silent except for the creak of metal racks cooling after a day's work. By 2 a.m., he had enough to outline the sabotage, but not enough to name Marcus outright. It was like holding shadows in his hands, obvious yet slippery. Still, he drafted a memo, attached the evidence, and sent it to Avery. Subject line clarification on inventory discrepancy. Then he sat back exhausted and whispered to himself, "This isn't over." The confrontation. Next morning, Avery pulled him aside. "You're thorough. The data matches your story." Relief washed through Daniel until she added, "But without a name, it looks like system noise. If I accuse Marcus without proof, I lose credibility. And so do you." Daniel clenched his jaw. "So what do I do?" "Survive," she said. "Keep producing results. Make yourself undeniable. The board cares about winners, not victims." Her words cut. He wanted vindication. What he got was strategy. A small betrayal, a bigger truth. That week, Marcus's influence spread. Colleagues hesitated before sharing data with Daniel. Jokes about rookie errors floated like smoke. He felt the invisible distance forming the way rooms cooled when he entered. Yet amid the whispers, he noticed something else. Workers on the floor. Forklift. Drivers, loaders, clerks still trusted him. They saw his late nights, his willingness to listen. One evening, Luis, a forklift driver with 20 years in the warehouse, pulled him aside. "Careful with Marcus," Lewis said. "He plays the long game. But remember, numbers don't lie, and people don't forget who treats them fair." It wasn't much, but it was enough. A thread of loyalty in a fabric that was fraying. The moment of collapse. At month's end, the board reviewed progress. Avery presented the turning point, a silent vow. The night after the board meeting, Daniel sat in his apartment, the final notice still pinned on his desk like a threat. His hands shook with frustration. He had done the work, and still Marcus's shadow hung heavier than his results. He poured cold tea into the sink, stared at his reflection in the cracked window, and made a vow. If they want proof, I'll give them proof. If they want results, I'll give them results so undeniable that sabotage will look like dust against stone. The shift. Instead of hiding in spreadsheets, Daniel turned outward. He spent mornings on the warehouse floor, afternoons with procurement, evenings with drivers. He asked questions Marcus never bothered with. Where do delays really start? What breaks the most? Often, if you had the budget, what would you fix first? He carried a notebook filling page after page with messy handwriting. Diagrams, arrows. The workers began to notice. They stopped whispering rookie and started calling him by name. Luis, the veteran forklift driver, slapped his back one evening. "You listen. Managers don't listen. That's why you'll last." Marcus pushes harder. But Marcus noticed too. And the sharper Daniel's improvements became, the more Marcus twisted his knife. One Monday morning, Daniel's access card stopped working. It claimed it was a glitch. Later, a shipment Daniel signed off on was rerouted to the wrong address. When he checked the logs, his ID was the one attached, except he hadn't been in the system that night. It was sabotage, deliberate, careful. Marcus was tightening the noose. The breakthrough. In the middle of the chaos, Daniel spotted something in the chaos reports patterns. The same errors appeared only on nights Marcus stayed late. The digital fingerprints didn't point directly, but the timing did. Daniel began to quietly build a dossier. He documented every mismatch, every altered file, every false trail. This time, he wouldn't just survive, he would expose the unexpected ally. One late evening, Avery walked into the warehouse unannounced. She found Daniel crouched between pallets, scribbling notes, while the fluorescent lights hummed above. "You're still here?" she asked. He didn't look up. "If I leave it to the system, Marcus wins." Avery studied him for a long moment. Then she crouched down too, blazer brushing concrete. "You know I started in supply chain. I know how dirty these wars can get." Daniel finally looked at her. "Why keep me here then? Why not let him win?" Because Avery said quietly, "Men like Marcus maintain. Men like you build. And this company doesn't need maintenance, it needs building." For the first time, Daniel saw not just a boss, but someone who understood the fight beneath the numbers. Small victory, big momentum. By the end of the quarter, Daniel presented a new routing model. Shipments now arrived 2 days earlier on average. Costs dropped by 12%. The board noticed. Marcus tried to interrupt again, but this time Avery cut him short. Errors aside, results speak louder. And the power struggle. The trap is set. Marcus was not a man to watch his empire shrink quietly. The more Daniel's name appeared in reports, the sharper Marcus's smile became. And behind that smile, plans were sharpening like razors. At the next strategy meeting, Marcus slid a stack of proposals across the table. A pilot project, he announced smoothly. High risk, high reward. If successful, it will cut costs by 30%. The board leaned in. Numbers like that seduce quickly. But Marcus continued, turning his gaze deliberately toward Daniel. I propose we let our rising star lead this one. He seems eager to prove himself. It sounded like praise. It was a guillotine disguised as a gift. The impossible project. Daniel skimmed the documents. The pilot demanded rerouting contracts, renegotiating supplier terms, compressing timelines by half. It wasn't just ambitious, it was designed to collapse. Avery caught his eye. Her expression was unreadable. She wasn't going to save him. This was his battle. Daniel felt the weight settle on his shoulders. If he refused, he looked weak. If he accepted and failed, Marcus would bury him. I'll do it, Daniel said, voice steady. The sleepless weeks. The next month became a blur of deadlines and tension. Daniel lived between the warehouse and his tiny apartment, fueled by coffee and adrenaline. Suppliers balked at renegotiations. Trucks broke down. A storm delayed a critical shipment. Every problem Marcus predicted unfolded exactly on schedule. Yet Daniel didn't fold. He adapted. He called in favors, built backup routes, stayed on the phone until dawn, with vendors in different time zones. The workers followed his lead. Luis rallied the drivers. Clerks volunteered extra hours. Daniel's grit was contagious. Marcus strikes again. 2 weeks before the deadline, a shipment vanished, 40 pallets gone from the tracking system. Panic surged through the warehouse. Marcus appeared in Avery's office with perfect timing. I warned you about entrusting critical operations to inexperience, he said silkily. Now we've lost $250,000 in goods. Daniel stormed in breath ragged. They're not lost. They were diverted. Someone altered the logs. Do you have proof? Marcus asked, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. Not yet, but this time Daniel was ready. The counterattack. That night, Daniel traced the diversion through system timestamps. He noticed a pattern logins that occurred at odd hours, just minutes after Marcus's badge scanned into the building. This time, he didn't just print reports, he looped IT security in. Together, they built a digital trail. Clear, undeniable. When the pallets resurfaced, delayed but intact, Daniel walked into Avery's office with the evidence. She read in silence, her jaw tightening. If this is true, Marcus isn't just sabotaging you. He's sabotaging the company. Daniel nodded. Then it's time the board knows. The boardroom showdown. 2 days later, the rise. A new reputation. When Marcus vanished from the company, so did the whispers. The rookie label dissolved. In its place came a new word leader. People noticed the shift warehouse staff, greeted Daniel first. Managers invited him to meetings he hadn't once been allowed in. He wasn't just a name in the system anymore. He was the man who had stood against Marcus and won. But recognition was only the beginning. Avery's offer. One morning, Avery called him into her office. She closed the door, leaned against her desk, and studied him. You survived, she said. Now I want to see if you can thrive. Daniel waited. I'm putting you forward as operations director for the new logistics venture. It's small, but has room to grow. You'll have autonomy, but also risk. If it fails, it's on you. The words echoed in Daniel's head. A year ago, he was jobless, staring at rain-soaked streets with no hope. Now a director title dangled before him like a ladder into the sky. I'll take it, he said. Avery's lips curved. Good. Because I didn't offer it for you to say no. The grind of growth. The new division was a skeleton. A handful of staff, outdated software, and contracts so thin they barely kept lights on. Daniel attacked it with the same hunger that had once driven him to return a wallet he could have kept. He renegotiated terms with suppliers, persuaded skeptical investors, and treated his staff like partners, not pawns. Slowly, the division grew. Contracts doubled, then tripled. Within 18 months, the once-forgotten branch was the company's fastest-growing arm. Board members who once doubted him now leaned forward when he spoke. The Millionaire moment. The day his division signed a 7-figure deal with a major e-commerce chain, Daniel sat at his desk staring at the numbers. His salary had multiplied bonuses piled high. For the first time, his bank account carried not just survival, but security wealth he couldn't have imagined. He was in cold financial terms a millionaire, but numbers told only half the story. The return. 3 months later, Daniel walked past the same bus stop where it all began. The pavement was dry, but he remembered the rain, the wallet, the temptation. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a card embossed with his new title, Chief Executive Officer, Northbridge Logistics Ventures. Yes, Avery had stepped back, trusting him to lead fully. The board had approved. The boy who once couldn't pay rent now signed contracts that moved nations. He stood there a long while, card in hand, until the city lights flicked on one by one. Full circle. That evening he wrote a letter, not an email, but a letter to the address printed inside the wallet he had once returned. Dear Mr. Lin, months ago I found your wallet on a rainy street. Returning it changed my life. Please know your loss became my turning point. And your daughter Avery, she didn't just give me a job, she gave me a future. He signed it simply, with gratitude, Daniel Carter. The rise complete. Daniel had climbed from soaked streets to the corner office, the legacy, the boardroom silence. 2 years into his leadership, Daniel Carter walked into a boardroom no longer as a guest, no longer as a name defended by Avery Lin, but as the man whose signature kept the company's future alive. Contracts lay spread across polished wood. Each one bore his mark, each one a deal he had negotiated not through charm or shortcuts, but through persistence. When he finished presenting quarterly growth, the chairman cleared his throat. Mr. Carter, it's rare we see this kind of expansion. You've taken a division we nearly abandoned and turned it into the backbone of Northbridge. The numbers speak for themselves. Applause followed, not cautious, not polite. Real, sustained. But Daniel didn't smile. His mind was already elsewhere. The empty apartment. That night, Daniel returned to his high-rise apartment. Glass walls, skyline, views a kitchen with more chrome than he needed. He dropped his briefcase on the marble counter, walked to the window, and stared at the city glowing below. He had made it. The bank accounts, the power, the title, every measure of success the world worshipped, he now owned. And yet silence filled the room like a shadow. Success was heavy when carried alone. The classroom. Weeks later, an invitation arrived. His old university requested he deliver a guest lecture on integrity in leadership. Daniel walked into the lecture hall, memories crashing over him, rows of chairs, where he once sat as a broke graduate, waiting for opportunities that never came. The students watched him with curious eyes, expecting formulas, secret shortcuts. Instead, Daniel told them about rain, about a wallet left on a bus stop bench, about temptation and choice. I didn't become a CEO because I was the smartest, he said, voice steady. I became one because when I had nothing, I still chose honesty. That choice carried me here. Every deal I make, every contract I sign it, still comes back to that night. The hall was silent. Some students scribbled notes. Others just stared as if they were seeing themselves in his words. The foundation. After that lecture, Daniel founded a scholarship program, the Carter Integrity Fund. It offered aid to students who, like him, faced closed doors not because of talent, but because of circumstance. At the launch, Avery stood beside him. She had stepped back from daily operations, but her eyes held the same sharp pride as when she first handed him that chance. "You've built more than a company," she told him quietly. "You've built a legacy." Daniel shook his head. "No, we built it. You gave me the first step." She smiled. "And you turned it into a staircase." Full circle. One rainy